Welcome to the ISM Rochester November Lunch and Learn webinar. I would like to mention that next week on November 16th, we'll have our membership meeting with our speaker, Tom Cook, who will speak on coming out of the pandemic and supply chain disruption, 10 valuable lessons learned and key strategies going forward in global supply chain management. So please be sure to register for this meeting. Now on to our presentation for today. Please be sure to put in the chat any questions or comments. We would love to hear from you. Our presentation for today will be on key elements of project management for supply chains. Our speaker for today is Jane Tierney, who we welcome back. She is the founder of Purple Link, recognizing there's a better way to obtain value and achieve results from and through supply chains. Jane has earned both in industrial engineering and MBA degrees. She is passionate about Lean and Six Sigma. She's a certified green belt and has her CPSM and CPSD certifications. At this point, I'll turn the program over to Jane.
Thanks so much, Kathy, and thank you, ISM Rochester, for the opportunity to be with you guys again today. Everywhere we look today, there are updates about supply chain. But what does that really mean? Because as a supply chain practitioner, and as I know most of you are, I think people really don't have a good understanding of what that means. And so I'm going to give you some things to talk about with those kinds of people in terms of project management, which is something that they might understand, although again, in a different way. So a little bit about me. I've been working with my own company, Purple Link, since about 2015. As Kathy said, I'm an engineer with an MBA with Greenbelt. I am ISM participant. I have CPSM and CPSD certifications. I also have a Scrum certification. I am an adjunct professor in the California State system. I teach supply chain management and operations management and stuff like that. I like to focus on things like assurance of supply, process improvements, reducing cost and scrap and inventory and waste and all of those things. I'm a big believer in metrics, in KPIs, key performance indicators, and also something called objectives and key results, which I learned about from John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters. I believe in a lean philosophy, but not too lean. Spend analysis, supplier management, all these kinds of things, which I think help supply chains perform better. And I'm going to apologize if you can hear noise in the background. My neighbors are doing some kind of renovation and they decided to pick today to do it. So apologize if you get some of that. So today we're going to talk about some of the values of the Project Management Institute, which is one of the premier organizations as ISM is with supply chains. We're going to talk about some of their approaches and just general project management approaches. I'm going to show you how these kind of line up. I'm going to talk about the product life cycle phase and how that is important to both organizations and both approaches. We have some shared challenges, but I think that using a project management approach in a lot of what we do in supply chain is a real winning combination. And then, as always, I give away some prizes at the end, so stick around. And if you want to be part of the prizes, you're going to need to email me. You use jane@purplelink.co. That's my email. Maybe, Kathy, you could put that in the chat. So if you'd like to participate in the raffle, please do that, and then we'll see how that works out. So this should be familiar to you. When we talk about supply chains, we have tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. This particular graphic only shows one tier of suppliers, but we all know that there's lots behind that. Manufacturers, and then distributors, retailers, and ultimately customers who make all of our lives possible. And by the way, we're in that customer group. So we all are consumers as well as supply chain practitioners. So this particular picture shows the flow of products, which goes both upstream and downstream. And I think that's important to talk about, the goods and the services that happen through the supply chain. We also know that information flows up and down and funds flow up and down. So these are important areas to consider because they're the same applications for up and down a project management structure. When you have a project, you've got the project getting done. You don't have the flow of products, but you probably have some materials and services that are being done within that project. You have lots of information in and out of the project, up and down the project, outside to key stakeholders. And then you've got funding, which is an important part of that. So let's look at some of the values, I think, because I think anytime that you're working with another organization, with another professional, if you can get aligned on the values, I think that is a very good foundation. So PMI's values include the impact from the project management itself, professionalism, volunteerism, giving back, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the community, supporting the community, being a good corporate citizen, if you will, engagement all along and within and without of the project, because stakeholder management is very key to that, and ethics. So in supply chain, we have very similar values. We have the global impact of supply chains. And so that's one of the values that we have is supply chain practitioners, is we understand the value of global supply chains, but we also understand the impact of that. And we want to use the supply chains to make a positive impact in this world that we live in. Professionalism, you guys are here because you're members of ISM. That's professionalism right there. Volunteerism, every group that I've ever worked with ISM, it has a very strong spirit of volunteerism because we all do this for the love of the game, right? We don't get paid for a lot of these activities, but it's important to give back to our profession, to our communities and things like that. So it's an important area. Diversity, equity, inclusion. I think supply chain people know this from as far back as we can say we were in supply chain, looking at small businesses to be included in there, making sure that we have diversity in our supply pool so that we don't have too much risk in one area. Being equitable and fair is very much inherent in what we do when we are sourcing, when we are choosing suppliers, when we're managing that. We are looking at the business impact on community, not only with our own organization, but with that of all of our suppliers, and to make sure that they are doing the same for their communities. Ethics is something that has to be core. I could have listed that first, because if you're going to work in supply chain and purchasing in particular, you've got to have very strong ethics. And today we've added sustainability. A lot of companies today are doing that with the GSC kinds of initiatives, but sustainability, I think, has been kind of built into the supply chain DNA for quite a while. So with project management professionals, supply chain professionals have a lot of shared values. So let's look at project management in particular. So we've all used this plan, do, check, act kind of thing. And we have that kind of thought that we use for a lot of things. And that's a good project management way to handle things. But if you look at project management in particular, there's usually 5 steps that come up in this process, which is a little more than the plan, do, check, act. There's usually an initiation stage. So someone says we need to do X, and X is a little more complex, a little more costly, a little more time consuming, resource consuming than the normal kind of business that's getting done in the workplace. So we have someone or something that initiates this project that's going to be enacted. Then we have the planning stage, and this is where project managers will tell you they spend a lot of time putting the plan together, the initial plan together, and then making sure that they fine tune that as they go through that. Once you have your plan in place, then the execution begins. And sometimes execution actually starts before your planning is complete, which can be okay. And a good project manager will know how detailed their plan needs to be before they can actually start some of the execution, depending on what the project is, the scope, and the overall context of that. So executing the plan, monitor and controlling all along that timeline for the project to get done. And then at the end, to closing that out, much like we in supply chain close out contracts. It's a little more complicated than closing out most POs, but if you've ever closed out a full-on contract, project management closing is very similar to that. In fact, they're very much alike because there's a lot of contract and legal things involved in that. So that's the process. But with the process comes some other types of activities and some other important things to consider. So here's another way of looking at this project management process, because as we know, when I align this to sourcing and to new product development in supply chain, which is one of the areas that they dovetail nicely, this draws this project management process as a circle, which we often do because as soon as we start one, we finish it, and then that usually leads to another one and another one and another one. And there's a lot of different cyclicality involved in that project management process. So here's some primary components of projects. They have a scope statement, a critical success factor list, deliverables of what the different participants and stakeholders are going to do, and the different people that are participating in the project. They have something called a work breakdown structure, which breaks down all of that work into who does what and who's responsible for that, depending on just how complex that project is. There's always a schedule and a budget. Quality is a main concern. There's often a human resources plan that says we're going to need these people at this point in time. We're going to bring these people in, and then we're going to have them finish up, and somebody else is going to come in and do their thing so that we can get this project accomplished. There's usually a stakeholder list. Communication is key, a risk register, and then a procurement plan. How are we going to get all the stuff that we need to do this project? So I'm going to show you some parallels to that in what we do in supply chain. So the project management has a scope statement. We typically have a statement of work. Critical success factors are there for us in supply chain as well, whether it's a new sourcing activity, new product development, a new part that we're buying, or even just a major upgrade to a part. And we also have expectations that we set with suppliers, which are part of these critical success factors. There are deliverables. Who's going to deliver what, when, and in what form? That's always a part of what we do in supply chain and in purchasing. In project management, there's a work breakdown structure that's very analogous to the bill of material. So the work breakdown structure talks about the work, the activities. The bill of material says these are the pieces and the components that you're going to need to create this thing that I'm going to buy from you. Schedules, budget, quality, all very much ingrained in all we do. Human resources plan, oftentimes that involves the stakeholders for the organizations between the supplier and the buyer, the customer's organization. And we have escalation plans, we have communication plans, we have a lot of things that identify who is who in getting this project done. In project by project, I mean by accomplishing the sourcing or launching this new product. So there's often a human resources component of that that's very important for everyone to have. There's a stakeholder list that's over and above the human resources piece. Here's all the people that are concerned, and that again can cross over into an escalation path and the escalation plans that we have, just in case we need to communicate that. Communication is key for all of these activities in supply chain. A risk register, we have risk registers, risk management, all of that's important. The procurement plan, that we have an overall procurement plan that we're working on in supply chain to make sure that we get all of the parts we need that are showing up on time in the right quantities at the right places at the right price, and all of those rights that you and I are all familiar with. So very similar. And then here's a different one, slightly different, with a version of components in project management. So these are somewhat similar: goals, scope, key achievements, timelines, again, schedules, budgets, work breakdown structure, human resources, communication, risk, quality. And again, that very much aligns to the supply chain version. Goals and expectations, scope, statement of work, schedules, budgets, all those things, work breakdown structure, bill of material, risk register, risk management, all of those things are very important. So you can see that as we don't think of ourselves necessarily as project management experts when we say we're supply chain professionals and supply chain experts, but these overlap quite a bit. And there is a lot of area for these to line up. So when people say these are very different, they might not be all that different. So when we look at this, again, when we talk about project management in supply chains, it's often with a sourcing activity, a new product development, a new product launch, a significant product change that is requiring different suppliers, maybe major upgrades or changes to parts that are there. So it's not everything we do, but there are aspects of it. And very often it is project management is coordinated, aligned with, integrated with supply chain when we're talking about sourcing, and in particular strategic sourcing and or new product development, new product launches. So keys to both of these organizations are really getting to know the customer needs and wants and focusing on those. So making sure that you keep the light shining on what is the ultimate customer looking for and how do we deliver that to them. The goals have to be defined, documented. Everyone has to have the same set of goals. And if you don't have alignment, you're going to have some problems. We know that in supply chain because sometimes we have goals that conflict a little bit with other functions. Sometimes our goals conflict a little bit with our suppliers. And so we have to work to reshape those, reform those, keep those aligned, and keep sharing those updates and the progress to those goals. In project management and in supply chain, we have to meet our obligations. Anyone who's ever been in supply chain, when you're missing that silly little nut that you need, that is the thing that's keeping you from shipping, you know that the obligations are important. And that nut can stop your line just as fast as that major component that you have that took hours and weeks and months to actually source and get going. But if you don't have that one little thing that maybe you could get from DigiKey, if it's not there, that line can't work and that line can't finish those products and you can't ship. So we've all have to meet our obligations. And in supply chain, we all know about timelines and deadlines and due dates and all of those kinds of things. Communication, very key. It's always important to communicate the issues very early and try to find some options to solve the problems. When I was a manager in the corporate world, I would say, bring me your problems, but bring me some ideas too for how we can solve this. Because I know that it takes a lot of different ideas to get things done and solve problems completely. We want to manage the costs in all ways, shapes, and forms, and always be aware of cost creep. So we think about this a lot in procurement. Yes, we place that order, especially today when we have inflation. And every time I had a client tell me, every time I talk to my suppliers, they want to raise prices. So they said, I don't even want to talk to them because every time I talk to them, they want to just raise the prices. But that cost creep is a fact that we've always dealt with inside and outside of times of inflation. And in project management, that happens too, especially when you have projects that are longer term than, say, 6 months or a year. After some amount of time, cost creep can happen. And it's always something that you want to keep your eyes out for and keep your arms around, make sure that you manage that as best you can, because we know that time is money. And we have to manage that very, very carefully, both as project managers and as supply chain managers. So again, project management in supply chains is really about managing the resources, the time, the budgets, the money, the whole scope, and keeping all of that on track, making sure our schedules get met, managing the dollars all along the way. We all have goals. We all know about baselines. Those are very important in project management as well as they are in setting metrics for supply chain organizations. So looking at our requirements, whether those requirements are manual or in some fancy ERP system that you're pulling that out of. Configuration management is very, very important in supply chain, making sure that you have the right configuration on order and the suppliers are delivering that right. Well, guess what? That happens in project management as well. They make changes to the plan. They make changes to components of the plan. And so everyone has to be aware of what the latest and greatest is. As a project manager, you're always looking for who's running under budget a little bit and who's running over and how can I balance that out? Who's running ahead of schedule, who's running behind schedule, how do I manage that and keep all that to make sure that I make my end goal and complete my project on time. So we're doing the same thing in supply chain. How are our suppliers doing? Who's ahead? Who's behind? Where's my cost creep coming in? Where can I get another cost reduction and manage that? So we've got metrics. We're looking at all of those things, the configuration changes. How do we work all that through there? And communication. Excuse me. I tell all my webinar participants, all my clients, excuse me, everyone I work with, that in this business, it's almost impossible to over communicate. So don't be afraid that you're going to over communicate. Be proactive, share the information across the stakeholders, and make sure you're responsive and that the people that you need to be responsive are being responsive to you. Here's why I say the project management and the supply chain fit so well. When you look at a product life cycle, this is a project, developing the product, introducing it, growing it, getting it through maturity, and then end of lifing the product itself. Product life cycle is a project. And there's many other projects too, but most things have this same kind of life cycle. A project has a life cycle. Products that we work with, parts that we work with have that. So you can see that we are all involved at the development stage. There's a lot of planning going on there. Then we actually get to work. This is the execution kind of stage where we actually introduce. That execution continues through the growth and the maturity. We're monitoring and controlling all along the way till we get to the closeout, which is the decline portion. So we can say, you can see how my superimposed purple line there for supply chain says we do pretty much the same thing. In some areas, we're actually leading the pack. So if it's a product that's getting developed in supply chain, we are ahead of that. We are trying to get sources in ahead of the time that we knew that we need them. We're identifying potential sources, selecting those sources so that they can get to work building components so that our company can actually build the products that we need, introduce that. We push a little bit ahead of that. We have anticipation inventory for a product launch. We have making sure that we're stocking up and have things that we need all along this product life cycle. And then we start falling off. So we want to make sure that our suppliers shut down before our factory shuts down, right? We don't want suppliers to continue making product at a certain level when we are shutting that product down, when we are end of lifing that product. We want to consume all that raw material inventory. We don't want to be left with a lot. And then we want to, once our factory has made all those products, we want to shut the factory down, but we want the marketing guys to keep selling that stuff because we don't want to be selling everything at a fire sale. So we want to continue those sales, even though our product line has been shut down. I use Apple a lot as an example. If you think about the phones that you have, and I have an old phone here that I use, it's an iPhone 8, so I'm probably in need of an upgrade. Maybe 2023 will be the time I do that. But what we see is Apple starts their production. When they make their announcement in that first week of September, they have inventory in stock. So they have been building these phones, whatever configuration is. This latest one is the 14. They've been building those for several weeks, if not months. So they have inventory available in stock. Typically, they announce on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then by the weekend, you can start actually getting those products in your hand. Used to be that you had to line up at the Apple stores and things like that. Now they do a lot of online shipments, and they have them in way more than just the Apple stores. You can buy them in a lot of different places. But in order to do that, supply chain's been working like crazy, getting all those parts, getting all those suppliers to get raw material so that the Foxcons and the contract manufacturers that Apple uses has phones produced and made and sitting there so that when they introduce them, they're ready to ship. And then, of course, they don't continue making those phones forever. So right now they're making 14s. They probably have cut off some of the earlier models. In fact, they often cut off the earlier models after about 9 months, is my understanding, that they'll make those phones and then they quit making them. There is inventory in stock because, as many of you know, you can go buy an older phone today. You can buy, I think, as far back as an 11 phone, version 11, but I know you can buy the 12s and the 13s still. But a lot of that inventory was made a year, 2 years ago, even up to 3 years ago, when they were getting ready for that. So they shut that down pretty quickly and move on to the next because they've got other parts to buy for the new product launch, which is going to be next September, because that's Apple's model. That's what they do. So the product life cycle and the supply chain, really, you got to work on these really closely. So here's another way to look at this: product development. Again, this is where I say these two approaches really coordinate and need to kind of work together, integrate. So in new product development, the first thing we do is this proof of concept. We've got schedules and budgets and cross-functional teams, and sometimes suppliers in this area. We're trying to put together our coordination plan. We're looking at how we're going to validate that this product is really going to be a go and really going to be something that our company commits to and then actually gets launched. So we have that proof of concept. This concurrent engineering kind of approach is a little bit new. And unfortunately, I still see organizations that don't really take advantage of concurrent engineering in this idea concept development stage of products. The more functions you get in there early on, the better off it's going to be. So you really want the manufacturing team, the production team. You want your key suppliers involved in that early stage. You want all the quality, the finance people, as well as all the good technical engineers that you have developing this thing. But get those key stakeholders together, and the marketing people. Don't forget about them. Get those people together when you're doing this proof of concept stage. Then when you do the product launch, we all know schedule is really critical. We put dates on calendars and say, this is the date of our launch. In my Apple example, Apple has their date. If you got a calendar, you know what that, I think it's that first Wednesday in September, you know what that date is. Everything is going to revolve around that date and making sure that there's product available at that time for that product to get launched. Schedule is so critical in that type of product launch. And there's so much to be done ahead of that to make sure that you're ready for that. There's the schedule, there's the actual announcement, taking the orders, fulfilling those orders, the budget. And in the supply chain, we're really looking at, do we have enough lead time in there? What's our cycle time? And sometimes we're taking guesses at what this is. We don't really know. If we're in operations, we say, we think our cycle time is going to be X, and we're going to try to pad it a little bit at first so that we have enough time, because we're working all those bugs out. So our cycle time should be 2 weeks to produce this first batch or whatever. And we might schedule ourselves for 4 because we might have a problem with parts. We might have a problem with tooling. We might have a problem with our methodology. We might have any number of problems that come in. So how are we going to get this done, and how are we going to move this forward? Then we have that growth or ramp that we call it. And this is when all of our suppliers are getting into that maturity, full-on production. We're scaling up, we're ramping up, we're adding, trending up toward getting to that high production area where we can all make the most money. And this is a good thing for all organizations involved. So there's a lot of watching, reporting, adjusting kinds of things going on. Supply chain is doing the same kinds of things. We're looking at where the inventory goes. Did we put it in the right place? Did we have the right mix? Marketing is adjusting their forecast to say, yeah, we thought the mix was going to be this. Again, with the iPhones, they're saying, we thought this was going to be the colors that really took off, or we thought that the memory was going to be mostly the full-on memory or the lower end memory, and they're validating all of their assumptions. In supply chain, we're adjusting. We're adjusting our rates, adjusting our ramp rate, our overall volume rate. We're looking at whatever problems we find in quality and delivery. Tooling issues come up in this area when we're trying to move forward. So we're adjusting and tweaking, just like you're doing managing a project. Then when we get to that maturity stage, this says, okay, now we're really turning from a new product into a standard product, or a product offering that's going to continue for some amount of time. So in the PMI phase, this is if you have a new product, this is where the PMI phase may just wind up. And they say, we've got this product launched, now it's in full production. Our new product work is finished, and those engineers are going to go off onto new projects. The manufacturing engineers have their shortly thereafter, after the designs are codified and validated and put into their final version, or we hope the final version. Then the methods engineers, the manufacturing engineers, they wrap up shortly after that, and they leave it to the production professionals. But as supply chain, we have to continue on. So we're continuing to report, to track, to make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to work. Although we are also peeling off certain portions of our supply chain team and saying, okay, we're going to go work on new products too. Now we've turned this over to the ongoing, to the maintaining type of activities. It's no longer a new product that we're trying to manage. It is an existing product, a current product. This goes to the cash cow. We're trying to make the money off of this, but we're still managing the inventory. We're still working to reduce cost. We're still working to reduce lead times and cycle times, trying to help everybody be as efficient and productive as they can, including our suppliers, so that they can be the most effective during this time phase. And then the end of life. And again, we begin end of lifing with our suppliers before anything else. Once we have the indication that this is going to be the end date, we want the suppliers to shut down, quit making things, so that we're not continuing to pump raw materials into a supply chain that should be winding up. So we get X number of raw materials. We want all those raw materials turned into products that we can sell, make those products in the operations phase, and then get that into finished goods, and then get the finished goods out into the right inventory location so it can be sold by our partners in sales and marketing, and hopefully sold at the higher prices, the higher retail prices, or the standard pricing, and not have to fire sale a lot of things to get rid of it. Now, we do want to keep probably some products, some raw materials for repairs and maybe spares and rework and some of those kinds of things. We might even have products that were standardized, or parts that were standardized, and now we're still using those on another version of the product, the next product life cycle, or another new product that we said, yeah, this works really well, so we're going to use it again. But we're managing all those kinds of inventory, and we're managing those throughout the globe in many cases, looking at how we can end of life one product while we're probably ramping up another one to launch. So there's a lot of shared challenges too between project management and supply chain. There's a lot of matrix management that's common today in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of overlap there. So that means there's a lot of responsibility and the accountability, but sometimes it's harder to get the clear accountability when you have matrix management. We don't want to see those salutes where this team blames this guy and this one blames that guy. So it's not me, it's either one of these people or functions or organizations, companies even. So we need to be looking at our influence skills, our persuasion skills, looking at the variety of skills and competencies that we need. And anybody who's still working today, which is, I think, all of you, understand that our skills have to continue to be honed and changed and upgraded, because the things that we need to do today, tomorrow, is not what we were doing 10 years ago. So we have to be always on the lookout to improve and to grow and to get better at different things. The skill sets that we're looking at today are a lot more varied than some of the things that we had to do even 5 years ago in the workplace. But we know that supply chain makes a huge contribution to a company. They can really be a huge part of the success of companies, which is why so many companies today are going to like a chief procurement officer or a chief supply chain officer managing a lot of these things, because we make big contributions. And this was reinforced through the last couple of years going through this pandemic, when people in managers and companies realized, wow, those guys in supply chain, those purchasing guys, they're either really good or we don't have the right skills in there. We need help. They need to do better, more different kinds of things. So a lot of people have that cream has risen to the top, as my grandmother used to say. But we also know that there's gaps in those skills that need to be shored up, and companies are working to do that. And as we know, the employment is low. I know several people that have been looking for jobs recently in supply chain, and it's almost amazing how quickly they're finding these jobs. That it's hard to hire. It's harder and harder to hire. And so people with skills are getting hired, and people that don't have those skills are really looking to get those skills so they can be hired more quickly. We know that we've got to make cross-functional decisions and make sure that we have buy-in from the stakeholders, because there's risk lurking across that supply chain. And there's risk in every project that gets performed. So we're trying to manage that. Project managers are trying to manage the risk in their project. We in supply chain are trying to manage the risks in our supply chain. Bigger as the supply chains get more global, get more complex, we're finding things that were hidden in our supply chains. I have a client that works in the paint industry. They had a client for one of their chemicals that said, hey, we can't supply this, something we need to make this thing for you. We can't get any more. We had some problems with our supplier, and they said, okay, we'll go to another supplier. We know that someone else, we just did a sourcing activity on this. We had 3 or 4 other suppliers, and we'll go to them. And they went to them one by one and found that the same thing. They got the same story. No, we can't help you with product. We're having supplier issues. We're having supplier issues. When they put the pieces together, they found out that there was a pretty severe fire in a plant in China, and that plant in China was feeding all of these potential tier 1 suppliers. So that was a tier 2 or a tier 3 supplier, depending on how you were crafting the supply chain. But that one fire impacted all of these other possible solutions and backup plans that company had. And they didn't realize that they were dependent on that one particular area, one particular factory to get that chemical that was needed for all of their other potential suppliers. So we find this risk through usually uh-ohs and oh crap kinds of situations. Now we're saying, how can we find those risks ahead of time and then put some mitigation actions in work? And as we all know, it's a difficult thing to do. It's not easy to do this. So today we need analytical skills, we need financial skills, we need decision-making skills, we need change management skills. We have to be flexible, adaptable, resilient, right? All of these things. And we need leaders in this area. So this is an area where it is ripe for people with leadership skills, with talents to be taking the bull by the horns, as they say, and making progress. Today, supply chains are global. We have multiple nodes in these chains, and some, again, that we are just uncovering when we have a problem. There's not much autonomy for any function that we're working with. We're trying to coordinate across multiple company sites, multiple time zones, multiple functions. We need the quality guys involved to buy this off. We need somebody to give us a deviation for a drawing. We need somebody to make sure that the sales order can be handled. So we need the customer service people. We've got different currencies that we're dealing with. We've got different political issues that we're dealing with. So there's a lot of potential risk in here, a lot of complexity that we're trying to manage. Not to mention the fact that the demand forecasts these days are all over the place. Who knows who needs what, when, and how? That's changing all the time. And now we've got political forces at work. Hopefully some of that, since we had an election yesterday, will cool down a bit, for at least until we hit the 2024 election series. But hopefully that we do have a little bit of time to catch our breath from that. But there's a lot of economic forces at work, and the changes in Congress, whatever those are going to be, could be contributing to that to here in the United States, or they can be helping that. So let's hope that they help that. But again, project management and supply chain, this is a real winning combination for companies. Supply chain management is coordinating throughout that entire supply chain, throughout that product life cycle, from the very beginning of the concept phase till the end of life. The project manager is focused on different aspects of that, sometimes just launching the product, sometimes overseeing it for the whole life cycle, sometimes just in certain aspects of that. We can use these project management tools and templates in supply chain to help us do better. We all know that we need policies, procedures, and processes documented and in use, adhered to, monitored, so that we can make the progress we need to make. Communicate. I can't talk about that enough. And skills. We need a variety of skills. I don't know anybody, and I know some pretty good people in supply chain, but I don't know anybody that has all of the skills that are needed today. I think it's really important that we combine and use that power of teams to make sure that we're covering things with the skills that we need in order to be able to accomplish the work that we need to accomplish. Because what I know for sure is there is a better way to manage all of this. We need to know the goals, the top level goals, and make sure that we've got that alignment across all stakeholders. Productivity, efficiency, these things matter. We have to know how to measure that, how to track that, how to improve that. So productivity is output divided by input. How do we get more output for less input? Whatever those inputs are: time, money, people, hours, material, all those kinds of things. We want to use this project management approach for applications where it makes sense and that can help us use those tools to apply to the work that we do, like clearly defined scopes of work, very detailed budgets, and very detailed schedules. We're managing resources, we're managing people, we're managing money, we're managing material. All of these things are important. Again, communication. And the last thing I'm going to say here is it's very important, whether you're a project manager on a project, assigned to a project in the supply chain area, ask for help before the damage is irreversible or severe. Don't cover things up. It's very important to be transparent, honest, open, and raise your hand, because help is usually available. As humans, we have been trained to don't share that problem with anybody else, just go fix it. But sometimes we can't fix it by ourselves. And in these cross-functional times that we're living in, it's very important to raise your hand and ask for help. So PMI skills apply to many aspects of supply chain. And so what are the opportunities in your company? Are your costs and schedules and risks being managed? And if not, who is in your company that can support this? Who is your support team? Who's in your corner to assist with helping you to take some of these techniques and processes and work them into your workplace. If you could use some outside support, then I invite you to consider working with me. If you want to get started, talk about how this might work, you can take time to schedule a free call with Jane.com. This is a free call, 30 minutes. I'm willing to talk about anything and everything with your business and see how Purple Link can help you achieve your goals, not only in 2022, but this is a great time to get planning for 2023. People are putting budgets together. They're putting their plans together. If you need some help to do things that you want to accomplish in 2023, Purple Link is here to help. So I'm going to give you the slides for this. If you want to participate in the raffle, because that's what I'm going to do now. We got a couple minutes left. So let's see who we have. Let me just let my phone refresh here. And then I'm going to use my fancy little random number generator to see. Oh, my phone doesn't seem to be, there it goes. Now it's going to refresh. Well, Kathy, I'm having some technical difficulties. So if you want to put your name in the chat and your email, then I'll be happy to send you the slides from today's presentation and sign you up for a dynamic dialogue subscription. And if I do actually get my my phone working and get those emails, then I can give out a gift card. Other than that, that's my presentation for today. I'm going to leave you with one thought, and that is that learning and innovation go hand in hand. The arrogance of success is thinking that what we did yesterday is going to be sufficient for tomorrow. Interestingly enough, I really like this quote. This was from William Pollard, who was born in 1911 and died in 1989. So that was quite a while ago. He was both an American physicist and an Episcopal priest. He started his career as a professor of physics at the University of Tennessee. He worked at the Oak Ridge Institute of Nuclear Studies, and he was one of the people who worked on the Manhattan Project, looking at research on gaseous diffusion from the uranium, working at Columbia University, and but yet all this time he was an ordained minister, and he worked with his sons to spread that spirituality throughout his community as well. So I think he was a really interesting guy, and I love the fact that he says, don't be arrogant in your success, that what you did yesterday may not be enough to get you through to tomorrow. So I will take questions, comments, anything that you have. That's my presentation for today.
Thank you, Jane. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat right now because we have Jane here live and she can answer your question. Anything to do with project management, any challenges you may have, that would actually be great to put in the chat.
And I'm happy if you just open your mic and ask too. So
yeah, just raise your hand and then we can open the mic for that. I think we did get somebody to put in their email to you as well. So
I
we're
got
all
that,
set with
Marcus.
that.
I will send you the slides.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Jane, did you want to do anything with the raffle or not?
Well, I'm going to see if on my phone, I'm not seeing anything. It's not refreshing, so I can't see that. So
Okay.
I'll do that offline and notify anybody that they won.
Okay, that's no problem. I mean, if you wanted to hold it off to the next program that you're going to do with us, we could do that too as well. I'm sure everybody will
I'll let you
will
know,
be
Kathy.
fine with that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to close out the program. I'm going to say thank you again for joining us today. It's recorded, so everybody's going to get a copy of the recording. And again, we'll also have this on our Rochester YouTube channel as well. So we hope that you will share it with your colleagues. And at this point, we're going to close it out. And thanks again, Jane, for everything.
Thanks for the opportunity.